Meter builds all their own hardware and software and becomes an IT team's single point of contact for the entire project. Meter designs, deploys, and manages everything needed to get high performance, reliability, and secure connectivity in your entire space. It includes everything from ISP procurement to security, routing, firewall, switching, Wi-Fi, and even cellular, as well as power, DNS, VPN, SD-WAN, and multi-site workflows. Meter's full stack solution covers everything from the very first site survey to ongoing support, giving you a single partner for all your connectivity needs. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring this episode. Please head over to meter.com/heavywireless to book a demo. Welcome back to another episode of Heavy Wireless, part of the Packet Pushers podcast network. My name is Keith Parsons, and today we're talking with Ben Toner about a product he has called nOversight. Ben, how are you today?
Oh, hi, Keith. I'm fine, thank you. Very good.
Well, let's jump right into nOversight. I was at WLPC in Prague. You got on stage and showed off the iOS version of nOversight. While you were still talking, I downloaded it, I looked at it, and I was blown away of how much information I could get on my iPhone without any other piece of hardware or software attached. So let's start with, what can nOversight on iOS do?
So today, just using the nOversight app on iOS with nothing else at all, you can immediately start to get a streaming information set, including RSSI, data rates or PHY rates in the up and down link direction. And you can also we can bring in other things that are like location and noise from the adapter, and bring them all together in a way which is then plotted on a time axis so that you can see what's going on in your network as you move around, and then just go ahead and explore.
Well, it's great fun to look at it and see all this information. I guess the first place to start is, how are you getting this data from my phone back into my phone when Apple's had, historically some issues about I can't scan on my Wi-Fi radio? How are you getting around that?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. First of all, Apple has not provided very much information at all through their normal developer APIs. And as you know, they're very sensitive about going beyond those APIs. You have to really respect them. But about a couple of years ago, they introduced something within their shortcuts application. So anybody who has sat and thumbed through their phone and had a look around probably found an application called Shortcuts. Shortcuts allows you to create little scripts, little tools that can automate. And one of the things is actually first brought to everyone's attention, I think, by Shetel Teagan, who identified that if you, within the shortcuts, ask for network information, you get some. And that, I think, came in iOS 16. And the first look at it says, okay, look, you can ask for this information periodically. And all of a sudden, here it comes, and it's got RSSI in it, it's got the BSSID, it's got the data rates, it's got the host name, it's got those sort of things. And Apple's ecosystem allows you to bring shortcuts into your application through a stream called an intent. And so you can actually create a shortcut, make it available for download, automate that download with the application. And then when the shortcut runs through a connection into your application, it passes the data in, and then you can consume it. And that's what nOversight does. It really just sets up this periodic polling via the shortcut, and then consumes that data and then turns it into the presentation layer that makes sense to people.
You've added one, it's kind of hidden. There is the little button at the top you click when you want to start, and you can see it go and runs the shortcut. And so I can see how that data is coming in that way. But I like what you've done with, you have different panes. I can be looking at my data graphically, and as you walk around, you can actually see the roam happen.
I think that's the biggest value of all, actually. I mean, some people might say, okay, so a bit of RSSI, even the fire rates they're interesting, but I think the way it's aligned to which AP you're connected to, or which BSSID, in fact. So within the AP you're connected to, how those signals vary as you're connected, and then you see a roam. I think that the real value for people who are looking at this is you can get up, walk around your own home, walk away from the AP, see the signal level drop, and nOversight colors that according to some thresholds that you can adapt yourself. Starts to go from green to amber to red, and then eventually at the point where it's red, you see it change. And we have this little timeline chart that's you can watch it change from one channel to the next channel. And from that, you can understand the band and various other things. It does a few other tricks as well, in that because there's not all the information available, we're trying to calculate as much information. So you get channel, but channel 1 doesn't come with band information. So you don't know if it's 2.4 or 6 gigahertz. And you also don't get bandwidth. But you do get data rate. And what you can do is, with enough samples of data rate, is you can eventually minimize what the bandwidth is likely to be. And over time, you can say, this must be a 20 megahertz channel or 40 megahertz
You're
channel.
kind of reverse engineering from the MCS table. If I have this, I must have been here.
Correct. Yes. And as you know, the MCS table backwards is a one-to-many mapping, right? So, and there are quite a few things that need to be explored in terms of how many spatial streams might the device be using. So you can make assumptions from what power mode is it in, and so on. And yeah, and from there, as eventually you get many options of bandwidth that it could be, and as the data rate changes on TX and RX, and it does quite a lot if you just move around a little bit, eventually you just whittle that down to 1.
Well, I think one of the benefits of this, and I'd like to give it to some of my customers and say, just sit and hold your phone and watch it. And amazingly, it's not as stable as one might think.
I think the biggest test I ask people to do, especially if they're in a home, is sit on your sofa where you tend to kind of use your phone a lot, or sit at your table or your desk. Just check if it's stable. I set my home up in a particular way with APs around the place, and I think many would share the experience with me that I am not allowed to put an AP in the living room. That's just not an option. The house
It's SLA.
not, yeah. So there's APs coming from 2 neighboring rooms, and if I set the powers just wrong, I can sit on my sofa and watch my phone just bounce between them all day long. And that's consuming battery.
And that's a nice thing to do in your home to practice. But in the real world, how would you use this out with a customer site, helping them understand their Wi-Fi?
So I have customers who do this, and I think we're going to get into the value of the different modalities of an nOversight, but from an iOS point of view, from an iOS Apple point of view, there's customers who just don't have test equipment. There may be an IT department. They're not necessarily a specialist. They just want to get out with their phone and walk around the site and just check that there's no dragging. I think there's a couple of event types that you can look at. One would be a roaming drag or a sticky roam, where you just see long periods of red signal before the AP changes to the next one. And so if you're walking down a corridor, you can see that. I have a customer who operates a mall, an outdoor mall, and we use it in reverse. We're walking down the mall and we're making sure we're not bouncing off the internal APs, internal to the stores, but that the external APs are covering correctly and not leaving gaps.
Is there a way to get in this information that you're kind of scraping off of the shortcut? Things in the beacons that come off APs, like the AP name, to make it a little easier than just BSSID lookups?
Unfortunately, not. That is not there. It's not there in the shortcut. Interestingly, it's not there in the deep logs that I take from other places. And when we talk about the macOS app, which consumes those, it's not there either. So almost the number one requested feature that is on the roadmap now is, could I please at least tag these BSS IDs and give them my own names so that I know this is what they are. Unfortunately, there seems to have to be a workaround that we're going to have to live with.
Just a little lookup table, a little host
Yeah.
file for our own use. One of the tabs you have under list has a bunch of details that are Wi-Fi details. I've seen other apps report these details on the channel, the band, the RSSI, the information about the AP I'm connected to. Are you getting that through a different way? Not through the shortcut?
So that's blending information. It's a good spot there. So the shortcut, when it's running, you'll see more of these fields fill in. So things like RSSI, they're only coming from the shortcut. Things like the BSS ID, actually, there are ways of getting that through APIs that are allowed, and so that's what's happening. And they're event based upon change, so they'll turn up every time you switch BSS ID and walk around without even having the shortcut. That just will change by itself. And a little bit about the security of the network, which is abstract. It's either personal or enterprise or open, but you get that too. So it's blending that together, as well as we spoke earlier, the bandwidth, which is coming from logic that's eventually working these things out. And these things start as little dashes, which means there's no information there. And eventually they come through.
Thanks again to Meter for sponsoring this episode. Please head over to meter.com/heavywireless to book a demo. Meter's the company that delivers a complete networking stack for wired, wireless, and cellular, and a single integrated solution built for performance and scale. Normally, businesses ask their IT group to provide them with fast, secure, high-quality, and reliable internet access, as well as all the internet networking, Wi-Fi, and cellular needed to cover all of their building and spaces. To accomplish this tall ask, most IT people end up managing a crazy group of multiple vendors, different contracts, and ever-changing pricing. Instead, you can have Meter step in and solve all these messy issues with a single solution. Meter builds all their own hardware, all their own software, and it becomes your IT team's single point of contact for your entire project. This is a fundamental change to how things are normally attempted. Working with their partners, Meter designs, deploys, and manages everything needed to get high performance, reliability, and secure connectivity to your entire space. This is a single integrated solution that scales from branch offices to warehouses to large campuses and even data centers, and includes everything from ISP procurement to security, routing, firewall, switching, Wi-Fi, cellular, power, DNS, VPN, SD-WAN, as well as multi-site workflows. Meter's full stack solution covers everything from your first site survey to your ongoing support, giving you a single partner for all your connectivity needs. Every building has a power meter and a water meter. Meter wants to make the same true for your internetworking and your internet. Please head over now to meter.com/heavywireless and book your own demo. What's your marketing technique of how are you getting this into your customers? Or if we have our own customers, they just go and pick it up at the App Store, and how do they learn to use it?
Yeah, so it's on the iOS app is on the App Store, so it's distributed through normal Apple channels. And the marketing technique is, well, first of all, the primary target for the iOS app itself is the home user. I really have been paying more attention to making sure that this is an application that is easy to pick up and just be fairly obvious what's going on, not needing really any insight into wireless. And I think one of the big changes that is going on in the version that is that you have, that is being sort of reviewed by the community and will be released very soon, is that I'm bringing in more ability just to see your network and visualize it without really needing to understand numbers like dBMs or anything like that. You know, it's either green, it's amber, it's red. You need to look at where you are, what location you're in. As you walk away, you see it go to red, and it's obvious that that's not good. So marketing and targeting of this application is really to the home user. It's done as a subscription model through the App Store. And one of the real reasons behind that is because I can offer a very, very low cost monthly subscription that somebody could take out when they move home, they move provider, they can have it for 1 month, they can use it to help set themselves up. And that's exploded. That became the biggest customer base out of all. Out of the, there's a more expensive macOS version, which is targeted at professionals and enterprises. This is just by word of mouth. Everyone, you can read it on Reddit. CNET covered it recently. It's just, oh, I needed a way to check my network at home. This is what I used. It's the only thing.
Well, and we'll just compare it to throughput testing. Some people just generically call them speed testing, but it took me a while to get my wife to not complain about bad Wi-Fi, even though her laptop was connected to the wire. She just, people call it bad Wi-Fi. So I can see why there's a market for people who want to do that. But there's a lot of people who just want to run a throughput test, to look at the number and say, I've got this big number. How is this giving the customers a different set of information than they would get off of a throughput test?
So I think the throughput test could give a really sort of false positive. That example we gave earlier of sitting on your sofa and it bouncing between APs is really bad for your battery life. It's not a great experience. It's not the way the network needs to be. But the throughput test could just hide that because it's often multi-streamed. So it's constantly creating streams and kind of trying using parallel streams to create as max throughput. So it would hide, it wouldn't see that. The other thing about the throughput test is, I think, especially with home users, they don't know whether it's the Wi-Fi or the ISP or something else that is limiting. And one of the things that nOversight has got within it, but it's not exposed just yet, is the ability to do some throughput testing. And the intention of it is not to come up with how fast is my network, but to actually say, what's limiting? Am I getting a throughput that's really close to my PHY rate? Or is it something else which is more related to my ISP rate? So for instance, you might say, I'm walking around my home and my PHY rates are in the gigabits because I've got a nice big wide network. And then I suddenly walk into a room and the PHY rates all drop to 20 megabits per second and the throughput test drops to that too, and it's clearly limited by it. So I see the introduction of throughput in small bursts as a way, and this is something I need to really still work on in terms of how users receive this, but it's a way of saying, your poor wireless is limiting your network right now. No, the wireless is really great. You're limited by something else, which will be your ISP.
I think that's a really useful thing for customers. I've tried to get them to not use a throughput test as the sole way of looking at it. What I like about nOversight is I can be like sitting right now, my PHY rate's 1.2 gig.
Yeah.
Yes, I have nice Wi-Fi here. So my Wi-Fi is fine, but no matter what speed test or what throughput test with Libra speed or whatever I do, there's no way I'm going to get 1.2 gig. I don't have that big of an internet pipe. So it'd be nice to show the difference, the ratio between the two, because just because I'm hitting my PHY rate doesn't mean my ISP's that, or the reverse is also the same. There's only that one case that you highlighted a minute ago, that if my PHY rate is the limiting factor, then I need to look at the Wi-Fi.
Right.
Well, let's move on past the iOS app, which is great, and go back in history a little bit. How did you start nOversight originally, and what was it trying to solve pre-iOS?
Yeah. So in previous roles, I was working on connection management for telcos. Telcos trying to deploy Wi-Fi to augment their cellular capability. And so they do it in popular dense areas, sometimes outdoors, town squares, and so on. And in those days, the logic in the phone was probably quite crude. It was fairly simply based on RSSI, and the phone would typically just find Wi-Fi, connect to it, and stick on it. And so if you put one fairly loud AP in the middle of a town square, all these phones would attach, and then you'd actually stop people from using the data from their cellular.
Well,
So in those days,
for Wi-Fi offloading, that's kind of what the cellular wanted.
except it would immediately congest, it would hang to its bitter end and not give any throughput. Um, so we were building connection managers to try and improve these things, and so we were getting deep into supplying a logic overlay that allowed carriers to provide their own logic, customized logic for how they wanted these connections, and it would be based on depending on what they deployed and where that was and so on. This was going really well on Android, but on there was a huge request. Can we do this on iOS? Can we do this on iOS? And at that time, it was very hard to do, and it was very hard to know whether you were making any real impact. And I was able to see that there were these logs there that were telling you kind of what's going on, but I was too busy and I didn't really have any time to do anything with it. Those days went, and I started my own company with an idea of really consulting, but also getting this niggle in the back of my mind, like, couldn't we do better here? So once I'd set up numerous networks, I went ahead and built this, and we had the pandemic, and I had time, and so this log parsing ability got built, and I found that you could just plug your phone straight into your Mac and actually see these logs that are constantly coming off the device. They never stop, and you can parse them in real time. And I think the very first version I ever built was a phone tethered to a Mac, and you'd walk around with one in each hand, and you could see what your phone was doing.
And how would you use that to troubleshoot?
So I think in those first days, it was about understanding what decisions the phones were making. So very similar to what we've just spoken about with the iOS app. You're looking at that roaming thresholds. I think that became the biggest thing that people ever did with it. Looking at those roaming transitions and what happened up to and beyond the roam. But from the logs, actually, and this is one of the key things today, what you get everything from the iOS app. You get the RSSI, the data rates, and so on. But you also get something Apple calls CCA, and it has three components to it: self, interference, and other. So really, it's a percentage, and really that's just utilization of the channel by your own device. Other things that are Wi-Fi that are presumably meaning a decodable preamble, so you know it's Wi-Fi, and then interference, which is something utilized in channel, but you don't know what it is, or the device doesn't know what it is. So you get that, you get retries, and then the biggest thing I think that people really latched onto was you get a stream of output from the roaming decision logic. So you get this: I'm looking for a roam. I've started at this time. I'm assessing some networks. No, I'm not going to roam because nothing meets my threshold. And then you see 5 seconds later, I'm looking for a roam. And eventually you might see this happen 3 or 4 times. And then you can see the exit reasons, which are the IEEE codes for why a roam has started and why it might not have happened. So you can see things like base station transition requests. If an AP has asked the phone to go, it'll say, I'm looking for a roam because I've been asked to go, and I've been asked to go over here. And then you can also see the device going, yeah, but actually I found something else and I'm going there instead.
Well, let's back up a little bit. And coming from an access point, we didn't have this for a long time, and then we finally added it, and some vendors have it and some vendors don't. But it's something that we're using now about channel utilization, and APs are sticking that in their beacon, and it's calculated kind of like what you just described, but from the AP standpoint. So when we use a tool like a Wi-Fi Explorer from Adrian, it will peel off that piece of information and report it from what the AP sees. How different is this They use the same term, CCA.
Mhm.
How different is it when it's coming from inside of an iOS device? You mentioned those three things. Those are the same ones that access points use.
Yeah, I think there's certain environments where it's really valuable to see it from the device's perspective. And actually, I think it's been at a number of WLPCs and other conferences where we've started to hear device vendors or AP vendors saying, we're collaborating with the chipset teams in devices because we need more device metrics. We need to understand the device's point of view here. I think a classic example, which I've used this in, will be in very high density environments where you get a lot of hidden node, and you're using very, very directional APs. The device is effectively omnidirectional in your hand at ground level, and an AP is highly directional above your head. They are listening to different things. And so the device is now seeing things which it calls interference-based utilization, which the AP doesn't know about. And so you can start to work these things out and understand them from that perspective.
I was just wondering if you've ever done any correlation metrics to peel off the beacons channel utilization and compare it with what the client has at the exact same time, the exact same place. Because you're right, they could be the same, but when they're different, then they're making different decisions.
Right. I haven't done that. I think blending beacons with device data is definitely soon on the roadmap. It's going to have a lot of value. It's just actually the bigger picture on that one is more. It would be really nice to understand the total environment using beacons. And then it would be really nice to position the device within that environment using its logic. Say, okay, so the environment looks like this if I scan it with a big wide open antenna. And then my device says this. So it's kind of sitting here in terms of how it feels it belongs in that big environment.
The Mac OS version, what's its market and how are people using it?
So that's definitely more professional market, or enthusiast, and we definitely get enthusiasts. There are two tiers. I've seen the lower tier being purchased by educational establishments. So I don't always hear back from people. A lot of people feed back to me and tell me, this is how we're using it, and it's really helped here or here. But we definitely see education establishments using it, and I think they're using it a little bit as teaching aids. So they'll buy in at the lower tier, just they don't need to do too much, but they need to sort of show some things. The professional market use it. There are organizations out there that install Wi-Fi in specific environments. It could be education, it could be stadiums, it could be hospitals. Some organizations have incorporated the use of an nOversight as a final validity check. So I've done my job, Mr. Customer. I want you to sign this off. Now I've gone around, I've taken a log, I've analyzed it, and the macOS version comes up with a report that you can produce as a PDF, and it comes up with a few sort of scales that say how well was the RSSI met against the thresholds that you put in as your design requirements, and you can get a histogram and so on. How well were other things like the data rates met, and it also brings out things like, did I ever find any nasties like beacons lost? So I went into a complete loss of coverage, and that's one of the things that the device will tell you is that when it's doing something like a hard roam or maybe even a panic roam, because it's losing beacons, and it'll say, oh, I can't roam because I lost all beacons. I'm starting again from scratch. And so you can start to get these things out. And if they appear in the report, the supplier knows that they need to go ahead and actually fix those before they ask for sign off.
Well, you have those two products, and they're both available in the Mac App Store and the iOS App Store. Is that how people would find them?
So actually, the Mac version is not available on the Mac App Store. It uses the way it streams, the logs can stream in. It uses some layers that are not eligible for publication on the Mac App Store. So you have to get it from the Numerous Networks website. So you can either go to numerousnetworks.co.uk or you can go to nOversight.com, which will redirect you there and download the app. You get 7 days to have a go, see if it's for you. And then if you like it, you can license it from there.
And the iOS version is just on the iOS App Store?
That is purely on the App Store. Yep, that's absolutely right. And I think I know which question will come next, which is one of my biggest questions is, can you bundle them? Because they go through different licensing mechanisms. One is the Apple's App Store and one is not. There is currently no ability to bundle them, but I hear what people are asking for, and I'm looking for ways around that.
Well, thank you for your time today, Ben. I love talking to you and getting into the nitty gritty of how Wi-Fi actually works. And you've kind of pulled back the covers with your tools to let us see some of those roaming algorithms. Most vendors don't like to share those. Apple is one that's at least given us some of their details about how they work, and you allow us to document that from our own point of view. If someone wanted to find you, how would they find you on the internet?
So I'm available either numerousnetworks.co.uk. You can use the contact us form and get in touch with me. It's ben@numerousnetworks.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn and X at Ben_Toner.
Well, we've been talking to Ben Toner and talking about nOversight, an app that he has running on iOS as well as Mac OS to help both end users and professionals do a better job of understanding how their Wi-Fi is running and how it's working on their individual devices. This has been another episode of Heavy Wireless, part of the Packet Pushers Podcast Network. If you have any questions or ideas for future content, please leave messages in the notes. Thank you.